This is Truth Frequency Radio.
The wicked ones obviously under heavy Masonic influence.
Welcome to Phoenix Rising Radio. Now is the time to lift your mind higher. Now is the time to rise above. I am your host, Phoenix, and welcome to tonight's broadcast. Good evening and welcome everyone. This is Phoenix. I hope you guys are doing well. It is a Thursday, March 8th. March 8th, 2018. Oh man, a lot of stuff going on today. Big news day, and it continues on. We'll talk about that in a moment. We're being joined by NeSe. He's in his happy, joyous, positive attitude mood, and he's ready to jump right into the conversation. Isn't that true, bro?
That is absolutely correct, Phoenix. No. Yes, I am here. I am here. I missed you all so terribly much. And I'm just saying, in an insane world, beep, bonk, bootaloo.
Hey man, how much snow did you guys get over here? Specifically where we're at, we're kind of guarded by the mountains. Wait a minute, I take that back. We're very guarded by the mountains. It's a very unusual topographical situation that we set in. So we sometimes get protected from weather from the west and the north and from the east. And we had the nor'easter here on the East Coast, and two of them, the a bomb Genesis one, and then the big snowstorm that just hit, and almost over a million people without power, 7 people killed, I believe, tragically, and other things. And I guess just yesterday they got hit with even more snow, almost 2 feet in some places. But I do know that very same system traveled across you. What'd you guys get, man?
Well, interesting enough, where I live is a convergence of 3 Arctic jet streams, and they just tend to throw things all over the place, where the weathermen are probably 30 to 40% correct, if they are. But we did get dumped on a little bit, where we got some rain, and then some freezing rain, and then some snow, some wet, heavy snow, and then another 6 inches on top of it. Oh. And so we had some crazy accumulations where the schools were closed, and there was the whole traffic advisories and stuff. But, I think we've discussed this before, Phoenix, that I believe that our continent has shifted, if not the earth in itself, on its tilt to where Maine and the East Coast has been shifted like a 45-degree angle if you were to take the whole North America and kind of tilt it 45 degrees, because whether it's global warming or another ice age or climate, or no, what is it called now? What are they calling it? Climate change?
Climate change. Yeah.
Right. But I think this is just, the greater cycles of Mother Earth, and she's just changing as she always does. And of course, if the powers that should not be could figure out how to monopolize on knowing such changes, then we should have carbon tax, right?
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, they tried to maximize on all of that, and the whole Paris climate accord. I called it climate. It was a crime. We'll talk a little bit more about that, because there's some hidden aspects to that people don't realize, and what they were trying to pull off. It explains a lot of the shenanigans in Europe right now. But you know what? We are expecting at any moment a special announcement. Apparently, the President of the United States entered the press briefing room today while Sarah Sanders was doing her press briefing, unexpected and unannounced, and said that there would be a special announcement tonight, right now. And apparently what it is South Korea is going to be making an announcement from the White House press briefing room. And I saw a picture before I came on the air of Kim Jong Un, the leader of North Korea, actually in Seoul, Korea. He went to Seoul, Korea by train and met, or was at the train station. I don't know if he went by train, probably military aircraft or something. But anyway, he was in Seoul and looked very happy to be there. And apparently there's an announcement that came out that North Korea is extending a message to the United States, saying that if that they would like to speak to Kim Jong Un, would like to have a personal meeting with President of the United States, and possibly going to be talking about peace between North and South Korea and denuclearization. And I'm sure we'll hear that announcement while we're on the air here, and we'll get some more news on that. But also, oh man, a lot of crazy stuff happening in the politics and in the world, but also in the skies today. Now, I've been talking to everybody for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, a couple months here, about how we were in a position where all planets were direct. And for most of this year, all the way up until today, we were in a situation where all planets were direct. And that actually ended last night, 8 p.m. Eastern on the 7th. But it officially ends. Let me put it this way, it came to a grinding halt. And the reason it came to a halt was the planet Jupiter stationed, getting ready to go retrograde. And it has been stationed since 8 p.m. last night, and it is stationed right now. So there is no apparent motion with Jupiter. It is standing stationed right this very moment as you're hearing my voice, and it will begin its retrograde phase at 11:45 tonight Eastern time. So you can translate that to your time, and then we'll actually be out of all planets direct and into a Jupiter retrograde. And that's going to mean a few things and change a few things. So I think we're going to see a lot of fast changes here. And it's evident. We're seeing a lot of stuff just announced yesterday and today. Everybody's been wanting to see the swamp drained. Is it all talk? Is it all BS? When's something going to happen? Well, a lot of people are complaining about the Attorney General Sessions. But it appears that he has come out, and there's been some things going on behind the scenes, as I suspected, because he had recused himself from the Russian thing, and rightfully so, and smartly so. And that Mueller investigation was going on, and everybody's talking about all these sealed indictments. What are these sealed indictments? Well, it was just came out this evening, and this is like the third big thing with Sessions in a couple of days, is that Sessions has, and he kind of alluded to it last night, but let me read it right here. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has confirmed a prior appointment of a DOJ prosecutor to parallel IG Horowitz, not a special counsel. Now, see, here's the thing. This DOJ prosecutor, that's a big deal, because a special counsel like Mueller, when they appoint a special counsel, that is to do an investigation to see if there was wrongdoing. When they appoint a prosecutor, that means there is evidence of crimes, and that's why they appoint a prosecutor. And apparently this happened quite some time ago. It's been paralleling the Inspector General Horowitz's investigation and his report, which is supposed to come out this month. And this would explain why we have these thousands and thousands and thousands of sealed indictments that everyone's talking about, with the Q drops and all this information. Like, when are we going to hear something? Well, apparently what's going to happen is this bombshell is going to drop with Horowitz whenever he comes out with his report of wrongdoing and crimes. And I'll remind everyone that these text messages between Strzok, the FBI agent, and his mistress, Paige, all of that information came out through Horowitz and his investigation. And also all the missing texts and pages, texts that they couldn't find, the FBI said were accidentally deleted. Well, they were found by Horowitz also. So they have been running this investigation. And the interesting thing about IG Horowitz doing this investigation, especially with a DOJ and prosecutor, is that Inspector General Horowitz is a Democrat. And not only is he a Democrat, he was appointed by the Obama administration, Obama himself. And he seems to be the proper guy to come out and say, guess what? I found wrongdoing. Because if it were anyone else that's a Republican or part of the Trump administration, they would be immediately attacked. They would say it's a partisan attack. It's not true. But the fact that Horowitz has been doing this investigation for over a year, and now we find out there's a prosecutor working with him, and it's been all in secret. The distractors or the radical left or the left-wing media, the lamestream media, the fake news, they will not be able to say he is a partisan hack. They won't be able to say this is an attack from the Republicans, because this guy is a lifelong Democrat and it was appointed by Obama. So that's big news. And also, Sessions, yesterday, everyone probably saw in the news that he had some pretty strong words for California, because California is absolutely, not going along with the law, the federal law. And they actually launched a lawsuit against some of the mayors and the state of California yesterday. And there were a lot of strong words thrown around in that. Plus, the Sessions announced that they were releasing information that had been held back in the Fast and Furious investigation. And if people aren't aware of that, that is Eric Holder, who was the former Attorney General of the United States under Barack Obama. They got caught in an operation that was dubbed Fast and Furious. And the Fast and Furious operation was where different agencies with underneath the Department of Justice were actually getting stolen weapons out of gun shops, and they were having gangs and different people rob gun shops in the United States, and they were smuggling and walking these weapons across the border and giving them to drug gangs, drug cartels. And the entire thing, it came out, was that they were hoping and they were certain that there would be American citizens killed with these weapons, and then they would trace these weapons back to U.S. gun stores, and they would use this to try to circumvent the Second Amendment of the Bill of Rights. And they were literally committing multiple felonies. Now, he has come out, Sessions, and said he's releasing this information that was held back. And what happened was the Attorney General, the former Attorney General, Holder, was found in contempt of Congress because he refused their subpoenas for this information. And right before he was going to be charged with contempt of Congress, President Obama pardoned him and went with executive privilege. Not a pardon, but he extended executive privilege and said that none of that information would be released under executive privilege. And he hid it. Now, Sessions is releasing this, and how Sessions is releasing this is because with some of the guns from Fast and Furious, there was a border control agent, a United States border control agent, who was killed in the line of duty, and he was murdered with one of these weapons, which means because a federal agent was murdered, there is no statute of limitations on that crime, and anyone who was part of that crime or responsible for that crime is in big trouble. And so Sessions has released that stuff too. So it looks like there's been a lot going on behind the scenes. People didn't know about. People thought Sessions wasn't doing anything. And there is strong, strong evidence that indeed they are getting ready to start draining the swamp. And, a lot of the speculation about possible arrest and these sealed indictments and other things, it looks like it's coming down the pike, and it's going to be pretty serious.
Well, if I was rolling for senator, one of the first things that I would push as far as a bill goes would absolutely be term limits. Because if I was to make a decision on how to proceed in draining the swamp, if you have been in politics for more than 12 years, you are the swamp. And so I would go in there and say, okay, if you've been in for 12 years, you have 1 year to find your replacement.
You know what? I think 12 years is too long. I think it should be 8 years. I think 2 terms should be the max, NeSe. And that's one of the promises that Trump said that he talked about when he was elected, that there should be term limits. And, Trey Gowdy, a lot of people know Trey Gowdy. He's he's been on a lot of these special committees and all this, and he's been a special prosecutor and federal prosecutor in the past. Real brilliant guy. He's actually leaving, and he's not going to be running again his next term for the next election, because he said, that very thing. He said this, politics should not be a career. He said, he goes, I've done, what I could as long as I could. He said, but I'm going to go home and concentrate on being the best father and husband I can be. He said, because, politics should not be a career for anyone. And so instead of talking about it, he's leading by example. And dude, I think, I could maybe see 12 years, but man, I think 8 years. I don't think they should serve for more than 8.
Well, I think of it as like in college or in high school, where you would be like a freshman senator or sophomore or junior or senior, and you can only be the head of a committee if you are a junior or a senior senator. But in your senior year, you know that you're going to be put out to pasture, and in that time frame, you need to figure out how you make your own money. Because I would also rescind any laws that says as a politician you get a cushy retirement for the rest of your life, also free health insurance for the rest of your life.
Well, that's one of the things, one of Trump's campaign promises that he did. He was one of the first things, within the first couple of weeks, he signed that thing where former people in government, Congress, Senate, and especially the White House and executive cannot become, employees of lobby organizations or certain organizations for like years after they leave office, because that was one thing. They go right into the pocket of a lobbyist. And the whole money thing too. I'm all for making money. I'm for wealth creation and all that. We all should be doing well. But I think there are ethical issues here, and like the whole thing in Washington D.C. where they could do insider trading and it was legal. Seriously. What was her name? There was that lady. I can see her face. The cook lady. What was her name? That went to she went to prison, NeSe, for like a year or two for insider trading. Oh, she's a cook on TV.
Oh, Julia Childs?
No, Martha Stewart.
No, Martha Stewart.
Yeah, Martha Stewart. And what it was allegedly she got a phone call from her stockbroker, and she did a trade or something, and somehow somebody got on her, and for that one thing, she did a year or two in prison. And the very people that condemned her, on the floors of Congress, it's legal. Insider trading, and people brought it out, like this really shouldn't be. So they passed a thing where they couldn't do it anymore. And it was a lot of, news about it, but it wasn't long. It's like a month or two later, they quietly rescinded it and made it so they again.
When we talk about the swamp and stuff, one very interesting thing that I've been told was by an individual that claimed, if you really want to know where the corruption is, go and research what retired DEA agents are doing. And interesting enough, the individual who told me this was a retired DEA agent.
Well, that's interesting. I knew a DEA agent active, and man, the stories this guy could tell me and the things that went on. So I'm not even saying
Afghanistan, in Pakistan, and American troops guarding opium fields, and yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh well, that
Iran Contra scandals and Mena, Arkansas, and.
Did you hear the program the night where I announced, because I was very concerned when Trump had sent thousands of more troops into Afghanistan because of that very topic. But then, and I said, this will show what's going on. But then the news started coming out that they were attacking all the processing centers. And they actually went in and he directed them to bomb all the processing centers where they're processing opium in Afghanistan. And they've been freely doing so for years. Ever since we've been there, we got it all set up. And they actually began burning poppy fields. So I was glad to hear that.
Well, yeah, if the end result is there, but still the VA is my drug dealer and I'm begging them for my opium. Which is really sad because they won't let me grow cannabis.
Yeah. Oh, it's an interesting thing. There was an article came out that they actually admitted, somebody from, Big Pharma, that cannabis has been proven to cure cancer. Oh, one thing real quick, I want to share something. Lake just sent me a message. She said South Korea's security advisor, Chung E-yong, said, quote, I explained to the president that his leadership and his maximum pressure policy, together with international solidarity, has brought us to this juncture. And he says, hang on, here he goes. This national security advisor said North Korea wants to meet with President Trump as soon as possible. And President Trump has responded that it will be by May. And that was basically it. And he said that his leadership and the maximum pressure brought him to this point. So it looks like there's going to be face-to-face talks between Kim Jong Un and President of the United States. And man, who thought they would see this coming? So that's, you were talking about drugs. Did you know that in North Korea, all drugs are legal? I'm serious. You can go, people who have been to North Korea, and you can look this up. You can go into a North Korean pharmacy, over-the-counter pharmacy, and get methamphetamine or cocaine, or you can, and they sell at the newspaper stands and the stores. They sell tobacco cigarettes and they sell marijuana cigarettes. And they have their own brands and stuff, with pot leaves on them. And it's been this way for decades. And so it is not unusual to walk down the street in North Korea and see a gentleman having a cup of tea, smoking a joint, while talking to a police officer, because it's all legal there. How weird is that?
Right, because it's so horrific, and how dare somebody, don't even get me going, Phoenix. The frustration of cannabis right now is just like through the roof. I'm actually, I think I passed Tesla's car a couple days ago of how high up, literally how high up my temperament is with cannabis right now.
Yeah, well, it's a battle that's going on, because here's the battle that's being fought with that is from big pharma. And you know that because of the benefits that are proven. Let me see if I can find that article that I was talking about, the doctor.
Well, Spain has been like at the top of the pinnacle yelling at the rest of the world, and they're saying, stop ripping the plant apart and let it be utilized in its natural form, because the entire plant works best when it's the entire plant. But right now they're trying to dissect it, and this is straight from pharma, big pharma, because the minute they can isolate a particulate of cannabis, then they can put a patent number on it, and then they make the money. And this is the sad reality of it. It's all about money and how the pharmaceuticals, and I've said this a million times for probably the last 10 years, the minute Monsanto has the perfect cannabis seeds, plural, seeds, then it will be legalized.
Well, here we go. Here's the study. I found it while you're talking there. And, do I have time to read this? Let me check our timeline here. Well, bear with me. We don't. I'll read this when we come back from the break. Everybody, don't go away. We're going to talk about a lot of things this evening. We'll be right back.
Real people, real radio.
Initiating the truth frequency.
This is Truth Frequency Radio.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Bonjour, Anine. Hello and hi, everybody. Welcome tonight, the Phoenix Rising radio show with Phoenix and myself, NeSe. We are here, and thank you all for being here with us as we discuss the world, its insanity, and how to try to have a positive attitude as you travel on this hurling rock through the galaxies to our next destination. Hopefully it's not a catcher's mitt.
Well, if it is a catcher's mitt, I hope they have good hot dogs there at the stadium. Hot dogs and popcorn. What do you think? Anyway, let's get back to this story. Big government National Cancer Institute. And this is the cancer.gov, NeSe. They finally admit that cannabis kills cancer. Really, I am so shocked. And this is what it says. Studies in mice and rats have shown that cannabinoids may inhibit tumor growth by causing cell death, blocking cell growth, and blocking the development of blood vessels needed by tumors to grow. Laboratory and animal studies have shown that cannabinoids may be able to kill cancer cells while protecting normal cells. A study in mice showed that cannabinoids may protect against inflammation of the colon and may have potential in reducing the risk of colon cancer and possibly in its treatment. The laboratory study of Delta 9-THC in hepatocellular carcinoma, liver cancer, cells showed that it damaged or killed the cancer cells. The same study of the delta 9 THC in mouse models of liver cancer showed that it had anti-tumor effects. Delta 9 THC has been shown to cause these effects by acting on molecules that may also be found in non-small cell lung cancer cells and breast cancer cells. A laboratory study of cannabinol, CBD, an estrogen receptor is positive and estrogen receptor negative breast cancer cells showed that it caused cancer cell death while having little effect on normal breast cells. Studies in mouse models of metastatic breast cancer showed that cannabinoids may lessen the growth, number, and spread of tumors. A review of 34 studies of cannabinoids in glioma tumor models found that all but one study showed that cannabinoids can kill cancer cells without harming normal cells. And that, everyone, was from cancer.gov. That's United States website on cancer. Actually, finally, after decades, has come out and said what people knew. I mean, as a matter of fact, the only reason I've been able to read that, because there have actually been people, NeSe, who have gotten in trouble on the radio for saying what I just read. But since I just read this verbatim, word from word from the United States government website, I can't get in trouble. But if I would have just come on here and said, yeah, guess what? You know, cannabis cures cancer and all that, I could have been arrested. But since I read this from the government website, I'm okay, because there have been people who've been taken off the air, persecuted, and prosecuted for saying the truth that I just read right from the government.
Well, that is the sad truth of it, is that the pharmaceutical companies, along with big money, have literally ripped the cannabis plant apart and are potentially making the absolute most amount of monetary gain possible. And the sad fact of it is that they could simply make it legal for everybody, to where everybody could just grow their own medicine, but that would just make too much sense.
Yeah. Well, I think things are going to change. I think we're seeing a change that's happening globally. You know, paradigms do shift, and I believe that we are in a paradigm shift. We're going to see a lot of things happen. You know, the suppression of the truth. And I've said this before in the air. I had somebody ask me one time, say, Phoenix, when is there going to be disclosure? And I said, what do you mean? What kind of disclosure? They said, you know, of like all the technologies, the hidden technologies, these health cures, these things that are out there, when will there be disclosure? And I answered and I said, well, that disclosure will be yesterday, 5 days ago, 2 months ago, 5 years ago, 3 weeks ago. And they're like, what? What are you talking about? I'm like, it's not when is there going to be disclosure? Because this stuff, people have been trying to come out with the truth of this for years. People have had cures to things, simple cures that, you know, that they can do based upon this article I just read. It's out there. And, you know, alternative energy things, all types of information. And it's not that when will there be disclosure. What we're looking for is when will they stop suppressing the truth? Because there's been disclosure. And unfortunately, some of these people who have disclosed things have died. They've been killed. They have been bought off. They've received briefcases full of money. They've been threatened. They've been framed. They've been poisoned. Stanley Meyer, the guy
suicided.
Suicide. Stanley Meyer, the guy who had the car. Yeah, and they were just getting ready. I've seen the video of him, and it was on TV on a news thing where they were getting ready to make available to the public, a kit that you could put on any car and it will run off of water because they had perfected it. And he had been driving a car around Arizona for a couple of years on nothing but water. And what they were doing is he had developed a way that they could crack any type of water and pull a hydrogen out of it, a hydrogen generation on board, in real time, which some people said was like that was going to be impossible. But he did it, man. This dude would like pour a gallon of water in the car in their tank, and it would immediately start reacting and creating hydrogen, and that hydrogen gas ran the car. I mean, and the only thing that came out of the exhaust pipe was water and oxygen. I mean, it's totally clean for the environment. And if you had a filter, you could fuel your car up at a creek, at a pond, anywhere that was non-salt water. You could literally filter it out and fuel your car, and it lasted a long time. Like 1 gallon of water, he would drive like 100 miles on 1 gallon of water. It's crazy, and they killed him. They poisoned the man, and they say that the United States military grabbed his tech, and no surprise there. But I think we're going to see a shift here, NeSe, and I think we're seeing it now. The whole drain the swamp thing. This isn't an easy task. Because, my God, they have every aspect of government and, the universities and, the tentacles of what they have done run so deep, big pharma. And it all goes back to money and control.
Georgia Guidestones.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the Georgia Guidestones, that was like their monument that they wanted to put out that they were going to cause this forced depopulation. And I tell you what, part of that was North Korea. A lot of people have been following Q, and there have been a bunch of Q drops again today. They continue on. So things are really heating up with that, and there's a lot of anticipation of this coming week of some action. And I have to tell you what, with what we're seeing out of sessions and things happening with North Korea, I think is true, because there's speculation, they say, that North Korea was actually basically a thing set up and controlled by the cabal, by the CIA and the deep state. And a lot of evidence that supports that they've been given technology and all of this stuff to develop these nuclear weapons. And when they needed them, they basically used them to hold nations in hostage, now with the nukes.
We've discussed this before because, when I came back from the military, and I came back from a Westpac, and immediately when I came back, I found out that the regular media did not tell the truth about what we were doing there in the Persian Gulf. And so then, I started researching, what escalated, why did we show up there and everything. And then when you get into the conspiracies of all of these wars, and you find out basically how pretty much all of them have been manufactured by bankers or leaders that are, whether you want to call them deep state or the hidden cabal, I call them the powers that should not be. But when I was researching Korea, one thing that I came across is how there's a main river that runs right through Korea, and that allegedly we went over there and told Korea that if they do not goose step in line, that we would just poison the river and just wipe out the whole country. And this is the whole thing of where the powers that should not be, they always need a boogeyman, whether it's an actual entity or if it's, West Nile or the latest tainted food or Saddam Hussein or Bin Laden or Venezuela or Korea. And what's really incredible, I came across this YouTube video that came out in 1967, the year that I was born. And it was a recording. And if you just replaced the word communism with boogeyman, it explains everything that still is occurring today. And this is 50 years ago. It basically went through the exact progression of what just happened in the last 50 years. But people would consider the guy a prophet because exactly how he stated it is exactly what has happened.
Yeah. And what's happened is the deep state. John Kennedy tried to warn about it. He was going to disassemble the CIA. And Eisenhower, his famous speech when he left office, warning of the military-industrial complex and what was happening, and it's very dangerous. And it really got entrenched, and Kennedy saw what was happening. He was going to try to dismantle the Federal Reserve and the CIA, and he got Kennedy'd. I think that was one reason Trump released all the Kennedy records and all of that. I believe what we have seen here was North Korea, like you were saying, they've always used it as a tool against South Korea and also all the other nations in that region. I truly believe that they have been a bastion of the cabal, the deep state. And I think it's been through psychological manipulation of both sides and all sides through fear. And I believe we have rogue actors that have actually been on site there in North Korea. Now, here's my theory. I believe, now this part is not a theory. We've seen this historically. We have seen in the past where North Korea, primarily Kim Jong Un, everyone saw him, Dennis Rodman going there, and everybody just thought that was the weirdest thing. But actually, what I think, NeSe, is Kim Jong Un, when he took power from his father, possibly didn't have the passion to be what his father wanted North Korea to be, or was what his father basically was forced to make North Korea be. And evidence of that is him willing to hang out with Dennis Rodman. I know it sounds weird, but he likes basketball. Dennis Rodman likes basketball, and I think this young guy was trying to reach out to the world thinking, hey, look, I'm like you. I'm not that bad. And I think he was in a situation where he was surrounded by a lot of cabal, deep state people on, the North Korean communist side who wanted things to continue on the way they were. Because what happens, the cabal makes things very comfortable for people who go along, and also very uncomfortable for people who don't. And, assassinations, etc., the hit list, the kill list. But the funny thing is, whenever we saw in the past, North Korea would try to reach out, Kim Jong Un, and he would want to do, talks with South Korea. And it's happened a couple of times, and it always got messed up, not by North Korea, but by the United States. And this was messed up by when Bush was in office. He would make the United States military do something or say something or not agree to something and totally put a kibosh on the whole thing. Because at one point, North Korea and South Korea had a city. They called it Peace City. It's still there. And they had commerce going, and they were trying to work together. But the Obama administration did things to stop it and to exasperate the situation. And Bush did it, Obama did it, and it would always throw a wrench in the gears whenever North Korea was trying to work things out with South Korea. That hasn't happened, with the exception of the military action by South Korea and the United States. They've been doing the drills. It's been provoking North Korea, and he fires the missiles and all this. But I think what's going on here, this is my theory. I'm going to present it to you and everybody else. I actually think that this young guy, Kim Jong Un, has seen in the past and knows firsthand that American leaders are liars. They say one thing, they do another. They promise things, they don't do it. But I think what happened was he saw Trump get in office, and he had to have noticed, like most of the world did, that the Bushes hated him. that the Bushes actually came out and said, absolutely no way, no Trump, never. And they voted for Hillary Clinton. And now people have to ask the question, like, why would the Bushes vote for Hillary Clinton? Why would people, senators, Congress, Republicans stand up and say, no, never Trump? And they didn't want this guy. And they did everything. John McCain, he's hardcore, like a cabal guy, he hates him. And he tied up, linked up with the left Democrats, the deep state. And I think what happened was that kid, that young man, noticed this fact that, wait a minute, they don't like him. So the very people that had lied to him didn't like this guy. And not only that, because leaders watch leaders very closely. They get intel reports. And he's like the first president that's actually said he was going to do things, and he's doing it. And he's got the media against him. He's got all the Democrats against him. He's got like half the Republicans against him. And the hardcore establishment of the Republican Party hate him. Didn't want anything, and they did everything they could. They threw millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars at this so he wouldn't, and told people to actually vote for Hillary instead of him. Now, why would the Republicans do that? Because there's something deeper going on here. This is the deep state cabal, and their boogeyman that they've created with North Korea and this control factor that they have. Who knows? A lot of there's a drug problem here in the United States. There's a thing called fentanyl. I think it's like a replacement for heroin. You ever hear that, NeSe?
Yes.
They say these huge amounts are coming in that's coming from China. I don't know, man. It may be produced right in North Korea. Saying they have all these drugs that are legal there. The cabal could be there churning out in factories, methamphetamine, heroin, fentanyl, all these different drugs, and actually transporting them out of North Korea and making billions of dollars off of it. And so it may be like what they've set up in Afghanistan, like the deep state did there. And now this stuff is, man, it is so entrenched, and it's got to be taken apart. And, there was some speculation, the false missile thing that happened in Hawaii a couple months ago, the false alert. There's video out there of a missile going up from the ground and hitting something in the sky and debris coming down. It was taken on a boat, and there were witnesses who saw this right at the time of this thing. And the speculation is that the deep state actually launched a missile to Hawaii, and they were going to actually hit Hawaii with a missile and blame it on North Korea to force Trump's hand to start a war. The deep state was going to do that. And the word is that they were aware of this, and the U.S. actually dropped that missile. And it was a rogue missile. It was not fired from North Korea, but a submarine from the cabal. And they basically kiboshed their major, would have been the biggest false flag in history, probably. So by them, if Trump indeed goes along and this works, where there's a peace agreement between North Korea and South Korea, and they actually start rolling in there and doing things economically, dude, it's going to dismantle the cabal in a big way in that part of the country. And that's going to be a big blow to the deep state.
Well, I always hope that things are going to be better, but it all depends on what kind of perspective you want to look at it. You can always find some really sad stuff, but you can always find some really good stuff.
Well,
but
you have to look at at what is actually happening and the results of it. One thing I've found to keep a positive attitude is to not continually look at the past, because there's got to be hope in this. And if we and that's what's happened. The cabal and the deep state has beaten people down. They've taken people's hope. They've crushed people. People think nothing ever changes. It's always the same. Why is it going to be different this time? You take that attitude, and also you throw in there the McDonald's and microwave generation that everybody is now, where like if it's not done in 30 seconds, it takes too long. So people are very impatient. So you put those two things together, and it is tough to overcome. But I just deplore with everyone. Just hope for the best and be positive in your outlook and looking for good results in all this.
Right. Well, you'll never get an argument with me about hope, but hope can be better well manufactured when you put action behind it.
And we're seeing action. And there are actionable things like what I just laid out with Sessions that's going on, the prosecutor. We're going to see this Horowitz thing coming out, and I think we're going to see a lot of action because I think what it is, NeSe, the complexity of what they had to do. We're hearing there's thousands of sealed indictments. I think these may have been generated from this secret prosecutor that Sessions has actually been running with IG Horowitz. And if that's the case, dude, we're talking about possible treason charges against people of both parties, Republicans and Democrats, possibly for sedition, because if it truly does prove to be 100% irrefutable, and it appears that way now, that there were high members of the FBI and the former administration lying to judges and illegally wiretapping the incoming president and his team in an attempt, and also illegally feeding the media classified information and leaks. All of these are felonies. And if it was done to intentionally remove a illegally elected president and his thing and delegitimize it, dude, that's sedition.
I know, but if they really wanted to drain the swamp, all they would have to do is on national television play the documentary Loose Change about 9/11, and you would take down the majority of all the senators and the politicians that are career politicians and the networks of all of that. It'd be that simple. Or
Yeah.
if you were to disclose all of the stuff about Gulf War illness,
it's going to take more than documentaries. Loose Change is out there. That's played on public access TV. One American News plays Clinton Cash. Which is like huge expose of the Clinton Foundation, pay for play. It's out there, but that has no legal bearing. What has to happen, we need people arrested. The swamp is going to be drained by people being arrested and being brought to justice for sedition, for treason, for all of these crimes that they've committed. And it is a large task. And it's going to cause people to freak out.
I'll believe it when I see it, but I don't think I will see it, Phoenix.
That's because you're blind. I'll tell you about it.
Well, that's one reason, but you can guess the other reason.
Yeah.
Well, this is the other thing too.
Be positive, man, because I tell you what, there is every indication that is going to happen. I know, and again, I can understand and I share your disbelief because this is historic. We haven't seen something this big that could potentially be breaking out.
Right, but just because I don't trust politicians doesn't mean I'm not positive, Phoenix, because I believe in humane beings because I've met plenty of them. And I know that there's children that laugh and giggle, and I hear it.
NeSe, we're going to break. We'll be right back, everyone. Don't go away.
Hi, everyone. It's Chris Gio here, founder of...
You must unite what has been set asunder.
We are TFR, Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome to Phoenix Rising Radio. Now is the time to lift your mind higher. Now is the time to rise above. I am your host, Phoenix, and welcome to tonight's broadcast.
Back to second hour of Phoenix Rising Radio right here on Truth Frequency Radio, where truth is premier. And speaking of truth, go over to truthiswellness.com, truthiswellness.com, and you will see a free ebook that you can get from Bob Gilpatrick of Boomers Forever Young. Click on that, and you will instantly be put on Bob's email list. They'll contact you, and it is a free download that'll come right to you in your email, and it has a wealth of information. That is truthiswellness.com. Anyway, I'm joined this evening with NeSe, and we're talking about what's going on in the world. And let me give you a little update here. As we were saying in the first hour, the announcement that came out of the White House was from the South Korean primary negotiator there, whatever. They have had meetings with with North Korean President Kim Jong Un, and he has extended an invitation to meet with President Trump. And there's an update to that, is that President Trump agrees. And he says, and I got this from Sputnik, over on the Russian side here, says White House welcomes denuclearization comment and also accepts the invitation to meet Kim Jong Un. So we are going to see here in the near future Kim Jong Un and his funky haircut meeting with President Trump and his funky haircut. So it's going to be an interesting meeting. I mean, will they go to a basketball game? I don't know. But yeah, this is big news, big changes.
It's definitely going to be a hair-raising experience.
A hair-raising experience. It definitely will be. You know, I was looking at some pictures of Kim Jong Un this evening whenever he was meeting a South Korean official there in Seoul, and he was the first. I think they said he was like the first North Korean leader to be on South Korean soil in like 60 years or some crazy thing, and he looked really happy to be there. I'm telling you, I think this young guy inherited this regime, and he doesn't want to do this. I really don't think the guy wants to be like this evil communist dictator. Is something he was born into. And I think he would much rather do deals and stuff and like be part of the world. That's just the vibe I'm getting right now. And this is, again, major blow to the deep state. Also, I got an update, and they say, while I was on during the break here from Lake, and she was watching an interview. We're talking about Fast and Furious, and the brother of the federal agent who had been killed with the guns from Fast and Furious said that he did an interview live and said that he and his family had met with Eric Holder 6 years ago, and Eric Holder, came in and was talking to him, said they would find out who was responsible. Well, Eric Holder knew when he was like they're talking to him that he was responsible because the guns came from their operation, but the guy said that whenever Eric Holder left, they all looked at each other and said, he's not going to do anything. That's the vibe they got. And of course, Fast and Furious, that's what happened with it. But he said what happened was his family reached out to the Trump administration, and President Trump contacted them back and said, yes, we will help you with this. And he said, everything, we're looking at everything that's happened in the past and going after everything. And that is why Sessions is putting out these documents that have been sealed, and they're reopening this investigation because, like I said, the murder of a federal agent, there is no statute of limitations on that. And this guy was saying, he said it wasn't only his brother who died. He said there were hundreds of Mexican people, innocent Mexican people who were killed by these guns because the Fast and Furious operation Oh, there was another guy. I should find the article. There's a gun store owner that has come out, and his store was slated to be robbed. And there were other gun stores that were robbed, and they were actually being robbed by federal agents. Federal agents were going in at night like burglars, busting the store wide open and like stealing guns. And then these guns were actually be taken, and they took hundreds of like weapons over. And the entire reason they did it because they knew people were going to be killed, and then they were going to bring up this big thing about gun control and try to get the Second Amendment repealed or changed, which is basically sedition. They committed multiple felonies that resulted in the deaths of many people, one federal agent, and the entire reason they committed these felonies was to change the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights. Dude, that is criminal sedition. And this has got to be fixed. It has to be. People are let me say something non-radio. People are pissed. They've had it. There's got to be accountability.
Right. Well, I don't know, here in my little town of Moorhead, Minnesota, when there is over 26,000 registered voters and less than 4,000 people vote, we'll see if that apathy, starts, maybe some muscles will get built up. But right now, I think the muscles that we have between our ears are not being exercised by the American people, and the docile of the sheeple has continued, and there are glimmers of hope because little shimmers of truth occur. But when it all comes down to it and it's all said and done, the only reward we get in life is death, because we get to go on to the next phase. And this phase is every single waking moment. When you wake up tomorrow, you have another opportunity to present the universe with as much positiveness that you can muster. And if you can throw a little bit of love on top of that, the more power to you.
Oh, yeah. And that is our task in this life school, to overcome the negativity, to overcome the fear, to overcome the doubt, and to have hope beyond hope and faith. And, that's what our ultimate goal is, and to get better and better and better. Do people do this consistently? No. People mess up. People have bad days. People have to pull themselves out of it. But that's the task. That's the task that's set before us, is to reach down within ourselves and say no to fear. Oh,
so
Oh, hold on, NeSe. I need to say something. I forgot. I was going to say it at the beginning of the program. I had mentioned something on Tuesday. I said that the book Mycelium Running that I had received, I said I got that book from Kurt at Keystone Herbs, and that was incorrect. We got contacted by Diane Dahl. She actually, and I hope Diane's listening right now, or listening to the replay, and she wrote, she goes, that was me who sent that book. And Diane, I'm so sorry. I apologized to her by email, and I just wanted to correct that with everyone. That was Diane who sent me that book, and a wonderful book called Mycelium Running. Again, I just a little announcement I had to put out there. Also, go ahead.
Well, one question I have for you, Phoenix, is have you been paying attention to the sunrises and the sunset lately?
The exact times of them? No, I have not. I do at times, but not the exact. Sometimes I'll look for the exact time of sunrise or sunset for a specific reason, but no, I have not been consistently doing that.
Well, interesting enough, you know what's occurring on this Saturday night into Sunday morning, correct?
Saturday night and Sunday morning. This Saturday night and Sunday morning?
Yep.
Well, I see
Spring forward.
What do you mean spring forward? Oh, they're
Spring
doing
forward.
changing the time.
Daylight savings time.
Oh, okay, thank you. I didn't even realize that. Spring forward, so we'll be changing to daylight savings time over this weekend. Thanks for reminding me.
Right. So if you look at right now, the length of daylight that is occurring, it's already 11 hours and 38 minutes of daylight already. Okay? So what happens Saturday night? All of a sudden, they increase our evening from 12 hours of night to 13 hours of night, where they disrupt your ability to count sunrise to sunset. And now, if you pay attention, this weekend is technically going to be the equinox of equal day and equal night. And it's not going to occur on March 22nd like the calendar claims it's going to, because as I've stated before, the sun and the earth do not placate to man's calendar.
But what about the listed sunrise and sunset times that they have? They seem pretty accurate. I mean,
Not at all. Not at all. You can go and find multiple, and we've tried this and we've spent hours doing this. And then also on an average, each day as we go to greater light or longer days, it increases between 3 and 4 minutes a day. However, if you look at some of these sites, they will have a consistent sunrise of the same time for like 4 or 5 days in a row. And that's absolutely not accurate. Every day there should be a shift at sunrise and sunset between 1 and 2 minutes from both ends. And this goes back to the claim that I've made that the powers that should not be know what's going on with the cycle of Mother Earth and the epoch of the ages. And this is part of the whole thing of keeping the truth from us, to keep us in dis-ease, or to keep us out of sync with the greater cycles.
well, I think the only way you could actually test that theory and to log it yourself, you would actually need, and again, it depends upon your topography and weather conditions, you would need something that you could visually catch the first rays of the sun or visually see the sun disappear, and to the second to actually calculate that, because a lot of the sites out there, the accuracy of them, like you say, they don't change a lot. I don't know. I've never looked into this. I don't know a lot about that, and we would have to look into that. But so you're saying that the equinox is actually going to happen. Now, have you been timing this yourself? Now,
we've been keeping track of sunrise and sunset, and you have to calculate the night to day. And like I stated, on Saturday, it's going to be 11 hours and 50 minutes of light. And then that evening, we're going to jump from 12 hours of darkness, and we're going to shift the clock ahead because of daylight savings and make it 13 hours of darkness.
No, because the movement of the clock doesn't change the light and dark. The setting,
it shouldn't.
Well,
right?
It doesn't.
It shouldn't, but it does. Just take the time and research it, and go to the Naval Observatory. Go look up Greenwich Mean Times, And the biggest thing that is the mass confusion about it, did you know there is actually like 5 different measurements of sunrise? There is when you first start seeing the dawn, when you start seeing the light, and then there's the point of where the sun just caresses the horizon. And then there's the point where the center of the sun caresses the horizon. Then it's when the entirety of the sun caresses the horizon. And then it's when it's the full day. And they're all called different things. And so the
ancients would actually do it in different ways. Let me see if I can find something.
But like you were saying, the only way that you can absolutely, with all accuracy, do that is to be in a topography where you're well above your natural scenery. And this is why the ancients had what they call ziggurats, or pyramids, or large mounds, so they can calculate these measurements. And so when
the thing about the minarets of the Islamic religion, they were basically astronomical in effect, like you were saying, a high level. But they would actually use sometimes astrolabes and different things and different types of calculation. I mean, devices to actually determine the exact movements of the sun and the moon. But I believe that one of them, I don't know if it was the Jewish. They would use a thread. And I'm trying to determine exactly what they would use a thread. And they would hold this thread up. Let me see. Determining the Hebrew day of the spring equinox. It's an interesting paper here.
Well, the other thing that they did too is they built these monolithic monuments. Like a prime example is the Snake Mound of the Ohio Valley, where each curve of the snake or its arc was positioned with a pole, which the shadow of that pole would hit the arc in a certain manner. And once all 7 arcs would line up, then they would say, look, it's the equinox or it's the solstice. Same with the pyramids and same with the Sphinx.
Yeah.
When the Sphinx directly looks at the summer solstice at a certain point that matches the stars.
Yeah, the ancients had a better grasp on this. The mound builders, like you mentioned, the Ohio mound builders, and the other mound builders and monolithic structure builders here in North America, they were, it's been determined scientifically that those were built some 6,000, some 8,000 years ago, and they were linked to the Peruvians, and there was a link between the two cultures. And the ancient mound builders used some of the same techniques of the ancient Peruvians, and also evidence of they were somehow tied in and linked to some of the Egyptian methods also, which is very interesting by some of the hieroglyphs that were found. You know, the ancient mound builders here in the United States, there's so little known about them.
That's not true. My ancestors discuss it all the time.
Yeah,
because they're very sacred sites.
They are sacred sites, but unfortunately, what happened was a lot of the the cultures who built the mounds and a lot of the stone monolithic things, as the native what's called Native American came across United States, from the Bering Straits. That's what happened.
Bering Straits theory. It's a theory.
Well, it's
and
more.
It is not a valid theory.
Oh,
yes, it is.
It was. These are some of the Native American legends also about how they came from the West and down from Canada, from the West, and came across North America and encountered peoples that were already here, and the peoples, and they overcome them. They Do
you believe that though?
Well, no, these are actually accounts from Native Americans themselves.
Okay, but as an Anishinaabe descendant, that it's in my blood, and I talk to elders and we read birch bark scrolls, we have been here since we can't remember. But there were some indigenous people that did cross the Bering Straits. But as we've discussed before, there have been indigenous people 6,000 years ago that have been traveling across the oceans like the Phoenicians.
Exactly. But see, like in the Ohio Valley, where the Snake Mound is and all of that, and the mound builders, I mean, it is well known that the excavations of those areas, they were very tall people, giant type people. They had red hair. And the Cherokee, even the Cherokee people, when they talked about when they came across from the West and came to the East, they encountered strange people, white skin, beards, red hair. They call them the moon-eyed people, strange weapons, and they defeated them. And they historically they recounted this to the Spaniards and some of the very, very early people, Europeans that came onto the continent, these stories. One good example here in the Northeast, there were all these stone structures. And the Lenape people, who were known as the first people, and the reason they were the first, because they were the first to reach the East Coast. And it was noted back in the 1600s that all of these stone structures were here, and the Native Americans who were here did not, use them or go anywhere around them. And once language was established between the Europeans and the Native Americans, they some of the the antiquities people, the I guess you could call them historians of that time, wanted to know why. They wanted to know why they had nothing to do with these, and they said because they were here when they came, and there were people here when they came. And they described them as light-skinned, white-haired people with red hair, and they killed them. They fought with them, and they didn't go into those areas. So, there was a lot of the monolithic stone things that actually predate what are known. And the entire thing too, in doing some research, the term Indian, a lot of people say, well, Indians were called Indians because Columbus, when he went down, in the South Seas, or not South Seas, but south of North America, he thought he had actually found India, and he called them Indians. But what I have found out through my research, when a lot of the Europeans and the Spaniards first came to North America, especially the Europeans, they referred to the Native Americans as not Indians, but they referred to them as Aborigine. And in their writings, they called them the Aborigine. And that changed actually in the 1700s is when they began calling the Aborigine of North America Indians. And the reason they did, because through all of the history that they could find, because they were finding all these ancient things that the Native Americans were saying didn't belong to them, were here prior, and all of the stories of conquest of these nations, and saying that they came from the West and they came from the North. And through all the research that they gathered, that is where they had determined that the people that they had encountered when they came to North America were not actually the true aborigine of the continent, but were migrant tribes that had come down over centuries and had been here centuries. That was not in question. They had come down, and through their own historical, recounting to first the Spaniards and the Europeans, that they had come across. And so the theory of the science based upon the stories told by the Native Americans was that they did indeed come down.
This is Truth Frequency Radio.
No hate, no hype, no fear. Real people, real radio.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
So close, and yet so far away are we, but together here we are. And you all almost were fortunate or unfortunate to hear NeSe belting out Buffalo Springsteen, because I didn't remember if I was muted or not. And it is going to happen one of these days. I foresee it. But if I may add this, as someone who went to University of Minnesota to get his major in Native American Studies, where I spent extensive hours reading all of the books that the universities want you to read about the history of my people, I learned that the majority of it was all lies. And all of it was in the vein of getting rid of what has been labeled as white guilt or American guilt, to the atrocities that continue to this day in the systematic genocide of the indigenous people. And the first thing that I would strongly suggest is go and look at the earliest maps of North America. And when you look at the earliest ones you can find, you will see what they call the Algonquian language group, which is the Anishinaabe people. And just as the powers that shouldn't be have utilized in their strategy for years, it's all divide and conquer, where they took the Algonquian language group or the Anishinaabe people and they labeled them into smaller little so-called villages or clusters after they wiped them out with diseases.
Well, the history, I believe, goes back even further than that. The peopling of the Americas, this entire spreading of human beings across, you talk about the earliest maps. Yes, the earliest maps available, but there is plenty of archaeological evidence that show even more ancient peoples that were here. And this is indisputable. As a matter of fact, there's an Indian mound near me, and they had done an excavation into the mound and found some pretty amazing things. I've been reading a lot of the archaeology of the East here and different things they've been finding, and there's a lot of hidden gems out there. They have actually found mummies. They have found mummies here in North America that were buried in the type of burial like was done in Egypt. almost like mummified like Egypt, and they're Caucasian mummies, and they predate anything that's known as Native American to our modern history by thousands of years. And it's pretty evident.
We're talking about mainstream archaeology that was dictated by the church in what evidence that they could produce, because if it went against the teachings of the church, it was considered blasphemy. And that didn't even start occurring until 1930s, where they were getting out from underneath the scruples of the church.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm talking about research that's indisputed, has been found and by local people and then confirmed by archaeologists and scientists over the centuries, over the years. And I tell you what, a lot of it you have to really dig for, because a lot of it has been suppressed. A really good one. They were digging a canal in this area, a couple hundred years ago, and they encountered a cross, and it was a stone cross that looked like it had Egyptian hieroglyphs on it. And everyone was just totally befuddled by it. And of course, the Native Americans knew nothing about it. It was very, very old and deep. And they actually transported this thing. They were going to transport it back to Philadelphia to have it taken to the authorities and the church. And it mysteriously disappeared. And it was never seen again, and no one knew what happened to it. So that is an instance right there where, it just blew the top off of it. And
right, but they consistently have been going back and forth of whether or not my ancestors' pictographs are the same as hieroglyphics. The only difference between the two is hieroglyphics are related to Egypt, where pictographs are related to indigenous peoples around the world.
Well, that's true. And but there are some examples of them. But there are other things. There's a lot of evidence that supports that the Native American peoples that were encountered here, and again, this is from the historical records from the Spaniards and the Europeans, and encountered and written down by the actual elders.
Conquerors.
No. The elders of the tribes. And
the conquerors. The elders didn't write them down. The Spaniards did, and the other people wrote down what their beliefs or interpretation of the elders gave.
There's no. There's accounts directly from the Native Americans that they encountered. Because they were asking questions, and they wrote down what the Native Americans told them. And the Native Americans told them that they came here and conquered a people and killed them. And they were very proud about it. And there was a lot of, bravado about it, that they had totally wiped them out. And
well, I disagree. And I think this is one of those things where we can each find our own references to support our own ideologies.
I don't know. There's a lot of history. Again, this is from the Native American history. This isn't European history. This is the Native Americans who said this, about that they had conquered these people. And again, and in their own writings, they didn't know who these people were. And there were people here, and they conquered them.
And at what point would you think the Native Americans would tell the Europeans that have destroyed their ancestry the truth?
Oh, no. These stories came about whenever the Europeans first got here, and there wasn't even fighting yet. This is long before the French and Indian Wars. This is when there was free trade and people were easily moving about with most tribes in most areas with the Native Americans. This was before the even before the establishment of the colonies were firm. This was very early on when these writings occurred.
Well, I mean, if we get into like archaeological speculations or specifics, and you just go look at the arrowhead, the Clovis arrowhead, we're talking about a way of making arrowheads that is estimated 10,000 plus years.
Good point. Now, right there, the Clovis arrowhead, which also has ties to the all the way down through South America, that would be the peoples that were pre-existing here when other peoples came in and overran them and took their lands and killed them. So there's a high degree of probability that your ancestors, NeSe, were not the first people here, but your ancestors came down in nomadic fashion and over people that were here and basically killed them and took their lands.
Yeah, I don't believe that. And through, I'll put my 6 credits shy of a Native American major, emphasis the Anishinaabe people, on it, because since I was 15 years old, I've been trying to find out where is Kevin Richard Shores from, on both perspectives of my father and my mother. And I have read thousands of books, and I've talked to thousands of elders. And my biggest dream, hopefully this summer I might be doing it, is to follow our legend of the migration when my people were at the East Coast and we knew the flood was coming. And so we decided to move inland more to a higher elevation. And that's where we came to Minnesota.
Well, that could be. And that could have been, who knows what year that could have been or when exactly that was. But, again, for yourself and some of our listeners, a couple things you could search would be like the Ket people. The Ket people, who were they? Ket. And that has a lot of research that have been with chromosomes that has been done by scientists, because they're trying to determine through genetic lines exactly how the Earth was peopled and what happened. And these are some very old, and they come. This research of the Ket people is, as far as I can tell, the first inhabitants of North America, and possibly the indigenous group. You could call them indigenous, the true Aborigine. And another one you could look for, the Moon-Eyed people. Moon-Eyed people. And the Moon-Eyed people were a group of white people that were killed by the Cherokee. And this is in Cherokee legends. Whenever you look for the legend of the Moon-Eye tribes, that you'll encounter all the Cherokee history of this, where they killed. And the Moon-Eyed people were white-skinned. They had blonde hair, reddish hair. They say they wouldn't come out during the daylight, and the Cherokee overcame them and killed them. Then you could look for the Giants of Ohio. The Giants of Ohio. And that'll bring you to the excavations and the history of these extremely ancient, like 8,000-year-old peoples who they attribute to building the mounds, red hair, white skin. And they had a very different type of pottery, and the pottery ties them into the Peruvian, like you were saying, these ancient spear points. Now, these were back in the days when the mastodon were, all over the continent. Mastodon, saber-toothed tigers, and all this. We're talking very, very, very old. So, there's been a lot of people here. There's been a lot of movement. And I think one of the reasons why they began calling the Native Americans Indians was the theory that they came across the peoples that were here actually weren't the Aborigines, but traveling tribes that had come across the Bering Strait from Asia, and therefore they call them Indians. And that's why they stuck with it, during the early 1700s and into our history, because the popular thought and conclusion by science was, and anthropologists, was that the peoples that were here had migrated from Asia, and they referred to them as Indians because they were Asian. But the whole history of the world and moving all around is a mystery, and we keep uncovering these monolithic digs all over, and ancient civilizations that predate anything in known history. Occasionally, we come across these things. So, I think.
Do you know what percentage of ancient Baghdad has actually been discovered?
Ooh, probably a small percentage.
Less than 10%.
Oh, yeah. Dude, they were doing some things with satellites, ground penetrating radar. And in Africa, in northern Africa, where they thought it was just nothing but desert expanses, they have found evidence under the sands of massive civilizations. Dude,
well, look at Rockwall, Texas. Rockwall, Texas, where there is monolithic stones that are in the formation of a wall where they believe could have been at one point a coastal town where the Gulf of Mexico came all the way halfway into Texas.
Yeah. Well, see, that was the other thing, these monolithic structures. Now, we have a lot of them here in the East, and they run up into Canada. And people, they're very mysterious, these huge stone fortifications. And see, that was another reason why it was confusing whenever they initially came here, the Europeans. Number one, the Native Americans didn't use those. And, a lot of the structures like here with the Delaware and Lenape in the Northeast were longhouses. And
right, but the Delaware and the Lenape are the Algonquian language group, Phoenix. So they're Anishinaabe.
Yeah, and this is the point I'm getting. They used longhouses, which were made from skins and bark and things. And of course, some tribes used the teepee type of houses and different type of structures, but none of them built stone structures, stone walls, and stone monolithic structures. And what they found were all these tribes basically stretched out all across North America that, use very temporary type housing. And these villages were on the outskirts or sometimes near these monolithic areas with walls and sometimes buildings. I read
after the flood, my people no longer went to those ancient cities. After the flood, because practically the majority of the North American continent was almost completely wiped out because of the major flood when we had such enormous collisions as asteroids and meteorites fell from the earth. This is part of my people when they talk about the Thunderbirds and like the phoenixes, when a celestial body would impact the earth and cause a major shaking and trauma. And this is part of the whole monolithic mounds of the Snake Mound. It's part of an ancient story about the bird or the thunderbird and the giant snake or the reptile or the dragon.
Yeah, there's a lot about that in ancient writings about the dragon, and it will return. If people are familiar with Mother Shipton and the Mother Shipton prophecies,
yes,
about the dragon that returns and traverses the earth and snaps its tail and all of that. You know what? There's a lot of ancient history that has been wiped out. And to know the truth of it, we never will, because it's just too mysterious, and there's been too many civilizations totally wiped out. But there there is evidence that we have civilizations on top of civilizations on top of civilizations. So the truth of how this all transpired, we will never know. We can go back to ancient history and we can piece things together as much as we can. A lot of them from different cultures fit. You know, you'll find, like you said, stories of the Great Flood all over the world. This is a global phenomenon, because it actually happened. And there's a lot of, physical, archaeological, historical evidence that the Great Flood did happen. That's without a fact. I don't think people would dispute that. And of course, other major ELEs, if you will, that wipe things out. And
well, even if you look at the indigenous people, like the ancient Vedas in India, they talk about what they call Brahmanis, which were basically UFOs or sky vehicles. Now, the Anishinaabe people, and for the life of me, I wish I could remember it, but we had a word that meant sky sled. And one of our utilizations of travel during the winter were sleds and sled dogs. And so we had a word for a sky sled where people used our sky beings, which are entities from other worlds. So this is part of why I believe that history isn't told properly, because then they would have to disclose that we are not alone on this planet.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think what we're seeing is a cyclical thing where every so many thousands of years, there is a major visitation. And I believe we're going to encounter one of those sometime soon. I really do. We're way overdue for it. But you can historically go back. We don't talk a lot about UFOs on this program. I've had some very good UFO researchers on before. Maybe we'll do that again. But one of the fascinating things that I find in a lot of the Renaissance era paintings from Europe, a lot of religious paintings, sometimes contemporary for that time, there's strange things in the sky that look like UFOs. And I mean, they're not marks on the painting. They're not, overlays. They were painted on there. And man, they look like classic things in the sky. And some of them actually have people pointing up to them. And also there's some historical, accounts of battles in the sky, of flaming shields and the ferocious battles in the sky, fighting back and forth, So these things are out there, and we're going to see them again. I know we will.
Well, no matter what it is, I've always made the joke that my worst scenario is that from the Pleiades to Ceres, there's the great Walmart between them called the Earth, and these entities that travel from the Pleiades back to Ceres and back and forth, every so many thousands of years, they stop at their road trip convenience store and they come and pick up supplies. And I believe that when the rapture occurs, that it may be like the Twilight Zone in the famous episode To Serve Man.
Yeah. Well, I used to joke with my friend about that, the great harvest. In the Bible, it talks about the great harvest. What if it is a harvest? What if the armies of heaven that come, and during the great harvest, it is exactly that. It's like harvest time. I mean, people speculated before that perhaps the reason there's so many overlays of all these ancient civilizations that have gone is that we are basically a food source that is allowed to build up to millions of billions. And they're like, okay, it's ready. Before, and that's why we're told thou shalt not kill. So you don't want the food source killing each other off, and all these things that are healthy. And then once they see the population's like full enough and getting kind of too smart for their own britches, flying around on sky sleds and stuff, they're like, harvest time, and then starts all over. And you have a new Adam and a new Eve, and the whole thing starts again. And then, centuries and centuries and centuries later, they start finding things like, hey, what's this? And hey, what's this ancient thing? And oh my God, look, I found this person buried here that they look nothing like us, and all this confusion, and it all begins again.
Well, absolutely. And if you look into these ancient sites and how they correlate with celestial bodies and alignments and Jupiter and the Earth and all of the zodiacs, and especially now if you start looking into Draco and that constellation that they just explained to us a couple years, by the way, there's a 13th constellation, and what kind of significance does it have with today and the alignments of all of these celestial bodies and these monolithic sites? And is it exactly as the Bible has metaphorically told us and the indigenous people that, hey, when all the alarms go off, if you keep hitting the snooze, you lose? And it's really heartbreaking. And if some of you have noticed, I've been kicking out some more YouTube pages. I got my rig running, and so I've been getting some YouTube stuff out. And I believe, and I want to get a YouTube out there hopefully soon, that the story of turning lead into gold is actually a metaphor for harvesting our gold or our soul. And so as they're transmutating us from lead into gold, our souls, that if our souls aren't light and divine, then you are considered cattle or goyim or sheeple, and it's okay for you to be part of the great harvest.
Good theory. Well, keep us posted on that. And everybody, be sure and check NeSe's channel. We're out of time, dude. Everybody, find someone you love. Tell them that you love them. We will be back on Tuesday. The topic will be, who knows? Hang on to your hat, buckle your seat belts, because we're going on a ride. See you, NeSe, and see everyone.
It's good to be back. Ape Gish Bimad de Ziwe Wien, and Toodles.
What he said. Out of here.